So the book we're going to read today is called, and I'm just going to call it Razia's Ray of Hope, one girl's dream of an education. And so as we read this book, I want you thinking about, because we're still in argumentative text, I want you thinking about what makes this an argumentative text? What features of an argumentative text do you see while we're reading this book? And the setting is set in another country, and we're going to talk about, like, why was that important to this book? Why was that a big deal? My cousins and I raced down the road to see what the excitement was about. Men and women were gathering around the empty lot in our village. Anytime we played in that lot, I'd find shards of clay tiles and not much else. This day, ribbons brightened the dry earth. Important-looking adults were laying a large stone on the ground, and women passed out chocolates wrapped in my shiny papers. My little sister Zara and I collected as many as we could and stuffed them into our pockets before asking for more. So we know that it's kind of a big deal that they had all of these ribbons, because apparently that's not something that happens very often. My grandfather spotted us and walked over. I hung my head, afraid he would scold us for taking more than our share of the candy. Instead, Babaji pointed proudly to the large cornerstone. This is where my school once was. I knew Babaji had gone to school. I loved hearing his stories about learning to read and write and calculate numbers. It sounded so exciting. What happened to it? Asked my cousin Hamid. Babaji looked at the ground. It was destroyed by 17 years of war. But what's happening today? I asked. The Nowruz celebrations are over. They are building a new school. For girls, said Babaji. A school for girls? Every night I fell asleep dreaming about going to school like my brothers. Please, Babaji, asked Baba and Aziz. If I may go, I must go. So we can infer that obviously girls didn't get to go to school, because she said, I've always wanted to go to school like my brother. So that text evidence lets me know that she doesn't get that chance very often. That evening, like most evenings, I sat by my brothers, Jamal and Carmen, as they studied by lantern light. They attended the boys' school in the next village. Baba and my father worked on our farm with our uncles and cousins. My two eldest brothers, Aziz and Ahmad, worked at the quarry cutting stones. They never wanted to go to school. Like us girls, they could not read or write. Jamal, may I have a piece of paper? I asked. Why do you need paper? You don't have homework. You can't even write. Yes, I could write. I had memorized the Dari alphabet and I could spell my name, but I was afraid to tell my brothers. What if they wouldn't let me sit with them? I kept quiet. So she's been studying her brothers and watching them so that she could learn. Whenever I found Babaji alone, I would whisper in his ear, have you spoken to Baba and Aziz yet? I will, my dear Razi. Babaji would say as he patted my head. It was always, I will. So I turned to my mother for help. Bibi, have you seen what they are building on the empty lot? Babaji says it will be a school for girls. Yes, I know, Bobby answered as she hurried me and Zara to join our cousins. They were on their way to the village tandoor to bake naan for dinner. I took my sister's hand. Please, Bobby, I want to go to school. Girls from our village are registering. Girls from other villages, too. Sarah told me when we played hopscotch yesterday. Bobby handed us our dough and shooed us out the door. I called back, I need to learn to read and write. I promised to teach you. Please. I will, said Bibi. She sounded just like Babaji. Months passed as I watched the school rise brick by brick from the dirt. But neither Bibi nor Babaji ever had an answer. At the beginning of March, the construction crew covered the bricks with white stucco that made the new school shine in the sunlight. They painted the door red, as bright as the flames of the tandoor. Each morning as I swept the courtyard, I heard girls chatter about the nice woman who started the school and the teachers from Kabul. Each afternoon, as I fetched water from the well, I saw girls on their way home from registration, carrying crisp new school uniforms over their arms. One night, as I lay on my mattress, I heard Babaji call my father, brothers and uncles, to a family meeting. I propped myself up to catch every word of their talk. Babaji started the jargon. Razia wants to attend the new girls' school in the village. I support her desire. Some of you are too young to remember, and some of you were not even born. But before the occupation of our country, before the civil wars, and before the Taliban, women in Afghanistan were educated. They were doctors, government workers, and journalists. It's time to give our daughters and granddaughters and des savus the chance to read and write. Our family and our country will be stronger for it. I couldn't believe my ears. Would I be allowed to go to this school? How do you think she's feeling right there in that moment, listening to that adult conversation? I couldn't imagine. The Jurga continued. It was Uncle Iqbal's turn to speak. Our girls need to help their mothers at home. We need Razia to work in the orchards too. Our trees are just coming back after years of drought, and Razia's harvests almonds and peaches faster than any of us. Razia can complete her chores before and after school. That will be the condition of her enrollment, he replied. Next, you'll want Razia to go into town to shop by herself, said my father. Or for women to shed their barkas in public. My brother always ended their jirga. Razia is not going. These 4 simple words made my heart sink. So we know that she is not feeling good about this situation. The next morning, I woke with the sun to practice my reading. From under my pillow, I took out scraps of newspaper that the baker wrapped around our freshly baked man. Even if I couldn't go to school, I was determined to be the kind of woman Babaji had described, a woman who helped others through her work inside and outside of her home. After my morning chores, I walked to the school. I passed a stone wall being built around the school grounds, and I knocked on the bright red door. A woman opened it and greeted me with a smile. Hello, my name is Razia Jan. Can I please come in? I entered a different world. Fresh white hallways, clean restrooms with desks, chalkboards, books, papers, and pencils, all in one place. It was unbelievable. I introduced myself. My name is Razia too. I want to come to your school, but my brother and father will not give me permission, I told Razia Jan what I overheard at the jirga. Razia Jan offered to come home with me and speak to Babaji. Maybe together they could convince the other men to let me attend the school. As soon as Razia Jan and I arrived, I ran off to find Babaji. Babaji, the Mulam Shabi from the new girls' school is here to speak to you. Please come greet her. Bring Baba and Bibi. I spoke a mile a minute, so not to waste any time. Babaji didn't look surprised to learn I had gone to the school on my own. He and Razia Jan spoke privately for several minutes. Then Babaji excused himself to find my father and mother. I stayed out of sight when the 3 returned to speak to Razia Jan. Can you imagine what that mom and dad are thinking in that moment? They've already told her no, but she went to that school anyways. Razia Jan thanked my family for their time. Then she described how her school would teach Dari, English, Pashto, math, health, and hygiene to younger girls. As the girls got older, the school would teach them how to read the Korean, as well as geography, science, history, and algebra. Razia Jan also explained how her school would provide textbooks, a new uniform, and healthy lunches for all students. Best of all, she said the school would be free. Baba sounded surprised to hear about everything the school would provide. He told Razia Jan he would speak to my brother Aziz when he returned from the quarry. But just then, Aziz walked in. Babaji spoke up. Aziz, I did not realize you were home. Razia Jan turned and introduced herself and her school. She knew Aziz was the one to convince. I ask you for your tolerance, if not support, for Razia's education. Please consider, if men are the backbone of Afghanistan, then women are the eyes of our country. Without an education, we'll all be blind. Aziz shook Razia Jan's hand and walked out of the room. I followed him. What does she mean by without an education, we will all be blind? I think that's figurative language. But what does she mean by that? Think about that for a minute as I finish this up. What would they be blinded to? Not literally blind, but blind to something. Aja John, why are you home so early? Are you feeling sick? I asked. His face was pale and sweaty. Yes, I have a fever. My body aches all over. I stopped for medicine on my way home, but I need Carmen and Jamal to read the directions to me. Please get me some water. I poured a glass of water and brought it to Aziz. While he dozed, I picked up the medicine bottle and slowly sounded out the directions. I looked up and saw Aziz watching me. How do you know how to read? I listen to Jamal and Carmen study every night. Please, John, please let me go to school. I will be able to help the family even more if I do. Ozus took his medicine and smiled. Then he went back to rest without uttering a word. Only a couple of days remained before Nora's and the opening of the girls' school. I sat on the stoop scrubbing potatoes for the evening soup. If I could not attend school, I would ask my friends to share with me what they learned every day. That would be the second best, yet far from perfect. As I picked up the last potato, I heard Ozus approach. "Razia," he said. I peeled the potato quickly to avoid his gaze. "I have reconsidered. I learned this morning that stones from my quarry are being used to build a wall around the girls' school." I did not move or make a sound. "Now I trust that you will be safe in that building, my precious sister. You may attend Jan's school." I could not contain myself. I leaped up and threw my arms around Ozus. "I promise to stay clear of danger. Thank you. But you must complete your household chores before and after classes. I will not let you down, Jan. Thank you." Soon after my family celebrated Nowruz in the orchards, we pinkered around the almond blossoms that were the first bloom of spring, and now the sign of a new school year. On the first day of school, Razia greeted all the students at the gates of the education center. "Salam alaikum, welcome," she patted each of us on the back, and we walked through the bright red door of our beautiful new school. I was led to the third grade classroom. My teacher introduced herself and then asked each of us to say our name and what we wanted to be when we grew up. My friend Sarah threw her hand up first. "Malam Shaba, my name is Sarah, and I want to be an engineer when I grow up." "What's an engineer?" Mara blurted out without being called upon. "I'm too young to know that, but when I become one, I will tell you all about it," Sarah explained. Razia waved her arms and our teacher picked her next. "I'm Razia and I want to be a doctor. I will build a clinic in our village and treat all the children for free." I spoke last. "Malam Shabi, I've always dreamed of being a teacher, and I promised my mother and my oldest brother that I would practice on them." So let's talk for a second about this book. Think about the setting of this book. It's in Afghanistan. It's in a country where obviously things are different than it is for us in America. Women obviously do not have the same abilities as us. So why was the setting important to this book? Like, why was it important that this book was set in Afghanistan and not in America? And I think the reason is it's important for us to know that is because if it was in America, it wouldn't have been a big deal that she got accepted into a school or had to convince her parents, because it's a normal thing for us. So on your questions, you're going to talk about, like, what was the author's purpose in writing this book? Like, what was he trying to do? You're going to answer the question of what was the author's message? Like, what did he want us to learn from these characters? What was the big idea that he was trying to teach us? And then I think that was the big part. I think that was the big part of those questions. So now go on and go click on that reading response, and we're going to work on this today and tomorrow. So if you want to do half today and half tomorrow, that will be fine.